Good morning, everybody. Thanks for coming out. This is an early morning session. Hope everybody went out to the TechEd attendee event last night. It was pretty cool to actually be in Europe and experience a soccer game. So my name is Brad Bird. I'm a system center and virtual machine architect for a Canadian company called Sistel Technology. I work out of Ottawa, Canada. So we primarily service government customers, but we do a lot of work with private customers as well. Now, one thing I saw while I was there, this is actually my first time traveling to Europe. Enjoying the experience very much. I brought my wife with me, so she's out partying and enjoying the sights in Amsterdam. She's liking that very much. One thing I got to witness, I truly believe that Europeans are as passionate about soccer as we Canadians are about ice hockey. And that was very interesting to experience yesterday and actually be amongst a crowd of Europeans watching what I believe is the same sport that we have the love for in Canada, or relatively speaking. So I'm going to talk to you today about Operations Manager 2012. The session's titled, How to Make Operations Manager 2012 Work for You, Lessons Learned and Beyond the Install. So let me just preface this by discussing what the presentation's about. So in my day-to-day work, a lot of customers that I see face common challenges. So what I'm saying is that basically from customer to customer, I get to their location, and a lot of the questions that I encounter are very much the same. Some are new, which is, in the end of the day, why we face these challenges. Otherwise, anybody could do it. What I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be showing you how to leverage, very simply, what's already in the console and some simple tools that most people are familiar with and can use. So there's a lot of information in there about maximizing what's already there. I'm not going to go too deep into things like management pack authoring or custom report building, things like that. And I'm certainly not going to be talking about the science and Planet of the Apes. So if you're hoping to see that in this presentation, you're absolutely in the wrong spot. Just a little bit of a waiver. If I know this session's labeled as advanced, and it is, because a lot of what I'm going to show you is inside the console, and it involves going deep inside and understanding how that works. But if you're looking at getting into the authoring and the nitty-gritty, that's not what I'm going to show you. So if you're an advanced SCOM admin, a lot of what you're going to see is you may know about it. There are some nuggets that you may find useful because, again, when I do get to a customer site, oftentimes there is a SCOM admin there, but somehow he's wrestling with this big mess of alerts or getting things under control, and yet we still find ourselves with a knotted issue that we have to work with. So if you want to be alerted about specific things that you care about in your environment using SCOM, then I'm going to show you how to do that. It's very much a way to focus what it is that you're using the product for. Also, if you want to assign a specific priority to how it is that you get your alerts or get your monitoring information, if you want something that's easy to manage and you want to be able to use repeatable process in order to maximize the value from SCOM, I'm going to show you how to do that as well using these different techniques. So before I get too far in, I like to give people, now that I've prefaced the presentation, an opportunity to, if this is not what they signed up for, no apology necessary. Next exit's in 75 minutes. So if anybody's here and you brought a banana, just peel them if you've got them. No? All right. So I'm glad everybody's here to stay. So we'll move on. So I've told you what I'm going to talk about, and this is how I'm going to accomplish it. I'm first going to address the topic of inventorying your management packs. There's some good value in actually inventorying your management packs. The other thing you can do is working with alerts. So I'm going to talk to you about the alerts, which is the most common method that you actually get your monitoring information, and that's out of the console and how you work with and design process around that. I'm also going to discuss notifications and channels and subscriptions. I'm going to talk about leveraging reports that are already in the box. There's some good value using those, and a lot of my customers ask me, can Operations Manager do reporting? And the answer is, of course, yes. There's actually a whole reporting infrastructure in place for that. I'll show you how to use some of those pre-canned reports and some process around how you can get familiar with that quite quickly. And we'll discuss dashboards and views as well. So, firstly, why is inventory management packs important? Well, you want to actually identify what it is that you're monitoring. Now, that said, a management pack introduces capability into the monitoring environment. For example, you've got management packs for Active Directory. So, Operations Manager, out of the box, can basically monitor server up-down, either by doing a ping test to a server or by deploying an agent to an Operations Manager server. The primary workload most of my customers use is Windows servers. However, Operations Manager can now, as of 2007 R2, deploy agents to Unix servers as well. And the process is designed to be somewhat seamless so that the technique used to monitor is similar between whatever the workload is, so whether that be Unix servers or Windows servers. Now, it's very important to actually know what it is that you're getting into. So, implicitly, say for example, if you import a Windows Server Operating System management pack or an Active Directory management pack, you could assume, well, I'm going to monitor Windows Server or I'm going to monitor Active Directory. Great. But does that absolutely mean that everything that you're assuming is monitored is in fact monitored? Absolutely not. Somebody had to write those management packs. They're XML code, right? There's a bunch of rules and monitors that are in there which are actually performing the job. So it's important to realize what it is that you're getting into. Now, how would I do that? Well, there's a couple of things that I could do. I could actually use the guides, surprise, surprise, read the guides that come with it. That's pretty important. But if not, I'm going to show you a technique that you can actually leverage PowerShell to pull the information out of the environment about the rules and monitors that are in there. Now, you can use the same technique to discover things like, say, just scope down to distributed applications or views or tasks that are in there. But what I'm going to show you in the demo is rules and monitors. Now, what this will do is it'll basically give you a list of what's in the environment. And I'm going to show you a big list based on every management pack that's in there. But you can scope this down to specific management packs if you like. The commandlet that I'm going to run is actually called, in 2012, it's called get-scom rule for inventorying rules in the management pack. In 2007 or 2007 R2, you were able to just run the commandlet called get rule. And there's some switches and formatting in the commandlet that I'm happy to share. They're actually in the slide notes. If you grab this slide off the website, once the presentation taping is done, you'll actually see all the switches and so forth. If I'm not mistaken, I've put those there. If not, happy to share that with you, no problem. It's actually available on the Operations Manager team blog as well, but it's just something that I like to go through. And then once you've actually got that inventory, you can very easily manipulate the results using Excel. I'll show you how to pull it down and just use a CSV file, which is pretty common, and then you can easily pull the information out of Excel. Let me just quickly show you how to do that. All right, so in my environment over here, I've got an Operations Manager console. It's pretty common. So I'm running 2012 RTM in my lab back at Sistel. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to launch a PowerShell commandlet. Okay, so you can see that I've actually got it running right here. Okay, so I've got one called get-scom monitor. And I've got another one called get SCOM rules. Let me just zoom into that. So you can see right here, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to select the object name management pack, which is basically, I haven't scoped that down to anything more specific, and I'm going to pull out all the management packs that are stored in the system. And then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to export that to a CSV file called rules5.csv on my file system. And I'll show you what that result will look like. So let me just run that command here. Okay, so that went through pretty decently quickly. So now if I look on the file system here, as you can see clearly I've actually got a rules5.csv file, right? So you can see that here, that's the output. And if I open that up, it's a fairly raw format that I get, basically comma separated, right? So I've got two columns here, one which has actually got the management pack name and one which has got the rule name. Okay, but the rule name will typically give you a good idea as to what exactly is monitored. Now, I'm not actually detailing things like the test or the configuration or anything like that, but it's giving you a good idea of what's going on, right? If you want to know more, you can always look into the guide, or if you're using a test lab, you can always drill in and get that specific information as well. Now, just very quickly, it's not the information that is shown here is not extremely usable, but you can very quickly get that information into an Excel spreadsheet, and with a couple of clicks you can format that as a table like I've done here. And just to show you quick, if I were to report to management or an operations team as to what I'm monitoring in particular in the environment, say for example here in the Active Directory 2003 monitoring management pack, if I say my management were interested to know what if somebody accidentally ran DC promo on the server, would operations manager pick that up? And if I look here, you can tell that I've actually got a rule that says the server's no longer a domain controller. So, you know, if you were assuming that somebody would catch a wrongly run DC promo command, you'd be right. It will monitor for that. So the idea is to basically go through this list and, you know, you've got information that's of use, right? So you can basically establish confidence that what it is that you want to monitor is in fact there. If the rules or monitors aren't present, or what you're assuming will be monitored is not, then the onus is on you to add to the monitoring environment. But this will actually give you a list of what's being done, right? Now, the guide will list much of this. Some guides are written better than others, of course. So I want to say that most of them will list this out. But if not, you can pull the information out, just as I've shown you very quickly here. And just using Excel, which, you know, pretty much everybody these days does use some form of spreadsheet software, you can get that information and make it extremely usable for your operations team or your management. Okay. All right. So let's move on. Okay. So alerts in Operations Manager. By default, information comes into the console in a variety of ways. You can get events, you can get alerts, you can get performance data. The information which is most often useful, or we rely on to see first and as our first kind of point of contact using Operations Manager, is the alert. All right? Now, by default, the top alert view is called Active Alerts. Alerts are messages that come from the individual monitors or rules that come in. They've been formatted, but they're an output from some test that's going on. All right? The information that's there has been formatted for you, but you need to be able to sort through it. There's a lot of information coming into Operations Manager. There's a lot of monitors and rules which by default generate alerts, and not all of them are necessarily relevant or something that you can specifically do something about, right? So they're not all actionable. And that's important to know because businesses formulate their processes around what's actionable. That's great that you get all this information, and it is important to know, but alerts need to be relevant to you and actionable for you to have an optimal process and leverage Operations Manager the way it's been designed. So the active alerts view, what I'm trying to say here is that it may not be the best source of information for critical processes and things like that. All right. So if you have different teams in your workplace, say for example you have a SQL team, or you have a virtualization team, or you have an Active Directory team, what you might want to do is you may want to scope the information that comes into Operations Manager. That Active Alerts view is going to give you information from every single management pack that's installed. Okay? Basically, it's just a bucket which gets information from everything. Now you can create a separate bucket to account for alerts which are closed as well, and I'll show you that. But if you want to get scoped information, you can drill under specific management packs. But it's kind of important to have a process around defining for people where they're going to get the information. And I would say that the Active Alerts view is not even the first place you should go to look for information unless you're a SCOM admin. So with all that information, it's easy to become disorganized and not know exactly what's important, right? So if you scope your information down, say for example for a SQL admin, you give them alerts specific to SQL Server, it becomes a lot easier to have a streamlined process and something that's repeatable and understandable, and that you're able to work with and quickly react to information coming into the environment. Okay, so if you actually have the management pack inventory, you've got a list of what comes in the rules and monitors. So you'll sort of have a baseline idea of going into or taking on monitoring in the environment. You have an idea of what information you're concerned with, right? So oftentimes we actually don't know what we don't know, which is why we have a monitoring tool like Operations Manager. So having an inventory to work with is great because we can establish confidence that, first of all, the things that we do know are wrong or can go wrong in the environment, they're actually addressed in the management packs. But we can leverage that inventory to add to the environment as well, right? Okay, so I discussed creating scoped user roles and things like that. If you have information that you already know is relevant and actionable to you, but that that creates some sort of an urgency, or that leads to a system down scenario or leads to application unavailable, what you can do is you can leverage these things called notifications to add to the alerting, right? So what that does is it allows you to get the alert information to a separate device and not specifically the operations console, which, at least for many of my customers, not everybody has eyes on the operations console at all times. Many people actually leverage email or SMS as their primary monitoring technique. And there's ways to address that, but you need to, when you're configuring Operations Manager, you need to address that from the console first, because the notifications are in fact just a copy of alerts, right? They can actually be formatted differently because of the devices that receive them, but that's the idea with notifications. Now, with alerts, there's a number of different things that you need to know. Okay, for one thing, the alerts have these things called severity. All right, so severity for alerts can come in. That would be informational, warning, or critical. Right. So that's the type of severity that can come in. Beyond that, you've actually got another field as well, which is called priority. Now, so many people that I work with who use Operations Manager don't actually leverage that priority field. Inside an alert, the severity actually gives you some idea of the criticality of the alert. But the priority, that's really designed to be leveraged and used with your business rules. So you can formulate your plan for how you work with Operations Manager based on alert severity alone. You can do that, and several organizations do, but oftentimes it's easier to use the priority field, and priorities can, of course, be low, medium, high. By default, when the management pack is authored, many of these priorities have been preset, but you may not agree with that. For example, let's say you design a process around high priority items. Well, what you could do is, using your management pack inventory, you could basically have it output what the priority is of the alerts that come out of that as well. And then you can set those up so that all high priority alerts get actioned in a specific way as part of your business process. Let me just show you a little bit about working with alerts. All right. So I was talking about the active alerts, and I'm going to show you an example here. So the information that comes in my environment over here, I've actually had this lab running for a good amount of time. I've upgraded it from release candidate to RTM. You can see here in the active alerts, to a typical admin, this is a ton of information and not easily classifiable as far as business process. I've got some information coming in here from the default network monitoring. It's picking up information from a Cisco switch or else a Cisco ASA device. I've also got some information coming in here from the VMM 2012 management pack. Yet in the same view, I'm getting information from IIS. I'm also getting information from OpsMan itself. I'm getting information from the Windows Server management pack, things about fragmentation and so forth. And I'm getting information from the Dell management pack, which is hardware-based monitoring. All in the same view. Not very easy to sort through, is it? So what I can do is I can actually restrict access to specific types of duties. For example, what I've done is I've created process so that I can have my SQL admins log in and view information that's important to them. Now, I've left the active alerts view, which is the default bucket of all information, but the reason I've left that is more of a validation. All right, it's just so that you can make sure that you haven't missed anything, but I've left critical information that they're concerned with here as well. So right now you can see that there are no SQL alerts, but they can view their state information to do with SQL, get health information, performance information, and if anything as pertaining to SQL does come in, it'll come in those scoped alert views, right? So that's pretty important, and it's a fairly easily understood business process. So let's see how I might do that for another team. So in several customers that I go to, we have this thing called virtualization. Small phenomenon today, right? Virtualization administrators are not always interested in the same things as, say, an Active Directory admin or, say, a server admin. So he may want a scope view just like a SQL admin might have. So what I've done is, again, I've left these default alerts as, once again, validation, right? So you get the scoped information here, so you can define your business process around what information he's mainly concerned with, he or she. And then you've got your default views, which are mainly validation. Okay, so if you think you might miss something, you have those default views that you can fall back on. So if I wanted to construct this, how would I go about doing it? Well, what I can do is, as an OpsMan admin, I can actually go into the console and I can define my user roles as I need them, right? So there are some default user roles in place. What I've done is I've actually leveraged the operator user role, and I've defined what views and classes SQL operators or virtualization operators are going to be able to see. Let me just show you how I did that. So what I did was I created a user role called SQL operators, another one called virtualization operators. As you can see here, I'm leveraging the Active Directory groups to manage that, to ease my administration. I'm still using the same rules, using Active Directory as anything else. I'm just handling that by group membership. But what I'm doing is I'm scoping the actual user role to give access to specific things and not everything under the sun. So not everything in life is always as fast as we'd want, and certainly when you're demoing in front of a couple of hundred people, things tend to slow down, right, when you want them to go fast. So what I've done here, I've actually defined what these types of users can see. So I've gone and I've restricted that to information that we've defined is important to them, right, to kind of make it, give them some sort of a repeatable process and action the information more quickly so that they can more easily do their jobs. All right, so that's the idea of scoping alerts. Now, what about those fields that I was talking to you about? So alert information is pretty important as it comes in. You can tell here by the color of the icon the alert severity, right? So critical is red, warning is yellow, informational has a little bubble with an eye. Now, that said, the alert information typically comes in, and it, for the most part, in most management packs, the alert severity will match the health state of what it's monitoring, for the most part. Okay, some management packs have that alert severity defined separately, but many times it'll match the health. For example, some versions of the SQL management pack, okay, will have SQL agent jobs come in with two possible health states. One will be healthy, one will be warning. Well, if you're an organization that relies on your SQL jobs, right, and you have a bad health state, means anything other than healthy that comes in, that's going to come in as warning. Now, if the alert severity matches that object health state, that alert's going to come in as warning. Okay, so why is that important? Well, if you're looking for some sort of a methodology to define business process around how you handle monitoring, one way that a lot of companies see it as alert criticality. Let's actually follow the alert criticality. So if it comes in as critical, we should care about it because Microsoft said so. Is that true for everybody? Oh, I don't know. You may want to play with those values, right? So if I look at the properties here of this alert, I've got some product knowledge and so forth. But if I look at the actual rule which created the alert, in this case it came from a monitor, I'll actually be able to see how that stuff gets defined, right? So if I look at my alerting over here, in this case, by default, if the test is bad, it's actually going to generate an alert. I can see that here. And in this case, the monitor is going to come in a critical or warning health state. So in this particular case, with the network monitoring management pack, the Microsoft team who designed this basically said, okay, well, if I get a bad alert, it's going to come in critical or warning health state. It's not specifically going to match the health state of the object. They've actually decoupled that. But you can change those values as well. Now, also notice these two fields, right? I'm sorry, I said that it did not match the object's health state. Well, it does. I said something incorrect. The severity of this alert will come in and it'll match the monitor's health state. And here's that priority field, right? So although this is a critical alert, it's coming in as a priority medium item. Well, my company may not choose to view that as a medium priority item. So if I want to decouple that, I can do so with an override. Okay? So in this case, what I would do is I just override for all objects of class network adapter, just for the ease of showing you that. Now, where the alert severity comes into play over here, what I would do is I would just decouple that from, match the monitor's health to, say, critical. That way, if I encountered the scenario, like I said, for the SQL jobs, where for my company, if a specific SQL job fails, or if all SQL jobs fail, I consider that as critical. I want that to come in as a critical alert, so I can define my process around that. Okay, so that's the idea of working with alerts. Okay, so next let's talk about notifications. All right, so I mentioned that not everybody uses the operations console as primary source of monitoring information. Now, I suppose if you're following the ITIL process to the letter, many people should have, some frontline tiered admins, and then after that, that gets sorted up to higher tiered admins and so forth. So typically, the operations console will be visible to, say, help desk staff, right? Not everybody has an organization that big where they have specific departments dedicated or who can be dedicated to monitoring. Some companies have the same admin who does monitoring as does server builds, as does pretty much everything, right? So that said, he could be busy doing projects. He's not necessarily in front of the operations manager console all the time. For the most part, email is the most popular way to get notifications. So notifications, remember, are basically just a copy of the alert data. The message itself, because it's just an output of the test, can be formatted differently, and you have an occasion to format that at the alert stage. You also have an occasion to format that at the notification channel stage. So if you're defining notification channel, whether that be SMS, whether that be email or command, you can format your messages appropriately to fit the endpoint device, right? So if you're getting an email on your BlackBerry or you're getting an email on your smartphone, well, that's not going to, the amount of characters for you to pick up what's important is not going to be the same thing as if you're looking at the email in Outlook, is it? So you may want to structure the message slightly differently. Another thing that you can do with notifications is, let's say you do have eyes on the console and you've got a department that's actually working on the issue. Well, you can leverage notifications to extend your business processes and actually use them as an escalation. Now, the way you would do that is either, implicitly, if emails come in, you may have a second level admin working on it depending on the severity, or you decide the criticality of the problem, right? You pick that up with your management pack inventory and you define your process around that. But what you can also do is you can leverage that console and say after X amount of time, if nothing has changed with regards to the problem, then you would leverage that and create a notification at that point. So that's how you would handle your escalation, right? You would use this property called alert aging, which I'll show you in the demo in just a little bit. So you can actually, I demonstrated how you can handle user roles, okay, to scope information for alerts and to scope information for how you handle console access. Now, that said, you can actually leverage notification subscriptions in the same way. And there are several different approaches to that. I'll give you some examples of ones that I use that are pretty popular. And that will come down to work that you've done with your alerts first, because the information comes into Operations Manager as an alert, first of all, after all. Yeah? So you do that work with the alerts, and then you translate that into what happens with your notifications. Basically, the notifications or the subscriptions are receivers, but they're going to receive that alert-based information or the messaging that comes through, and then you can react on it in form of a notification. Now, because Operations Manager is a monitoring tool, it's designed for you to be proactive about the environment and not necessarily reactive. You certainly don't want to know when something's failed, that you could have done something about it ahead of time. So alerts and notifications are kind of like your early warning signal, right? They're actually they're made so that you can do something about it, and hopefully, it's not the end of the world by the time you get to fixing the issue. Now, in the same way that we structured the user roles for alert for console access, you can use the notification subscriptions and create subscriber groups based on your Active Directory group. So you don't necessarily want to decouple how it is that you're managing your processes in the environment. Do leverage Active Directory as much as possible and use groups and group membership, and then handle subscribers in that way. And then you attach your notification subscriptions to your subscribers, right? But depending on your strategy, whether you're using notifications as an escalation or as a primary monitoring strategy, you'll adjust your notification subscriptions accordingly. So several approaches that I see are common, or that I suggest to customers at least, are if they're designing notification strategies, leverage what's coming in from the alerts. Two easy ways to do that are critical alerts. So if alert severity comes in as critical, you can create notification subscriptions based on that. If the company doesn't have an idea of exactly how they want to define a notification subscription, and if they just kind of want to get a taste of it, that's one way to do it. It's not a really good idea to go and, when you're creating a notification subscription, just allow all alerting information to come in. If you do that, and you're going to get that information coming into the OpsMan console and your email system, you're not going to like the product very much. And it won't last long before you disable that notification subscription, right? You could flood the email server very easily, and then that, that'll just generate more alerts. So it's a fantastic little cycle you'll have created there. If you're monitoring Exchange, that is, right? Another way to do it, so I mentioned that priority field and not just the severity field, right? So if we want to leave the way the product team kind of defined alert severity, and we say, you know what, we don't want to mess with that. What we want to do is, we already know that we can take inventory of our management pack and we can define what's important. That's enough for us. So what we're going to do is we're going to define our process around that priority field. And then what we're going to do is we're going to define our notification subscription to match what comes in and follow that priority field. You can do that too. Another thing that you can do is, let's say, and I define this as a temporary based approach because it should be part of the whole plan. It does happen in OpsMan that you get information. Let's say you've got it down and you're like, well, how did that happen? Because this should have been monitored. We should have caught this. It can happen that you've missed something and you may not have put process around it. Using your validation or your active alerts, get that information, you figure out what's important that you've missed, and what you can do is, based on the information that came in, using a single alert as a source, you can create a notification subscription based on just that, right? That's why I call those temporary scenarios, because they're not specifically part of a greater plan. However, they'll address the immediate need. Right? So you handle it like that, and I'll demonstrate how to do that. So you can handle those kind of one-offs if you like. So let me go ahead and demonstrate that for you. Excuse me. All right. Okay, so notification subscriptions. So one thing I didn't mention when I showed the scoped alerts is that in the console right here, you notice these areas over here. my operators really only had two sections. They had monitoring and they had my workspace, right? But as the OpsMan admin, I get access to these additional spaces: authoring, reporting, and administration. Now, as the SCOM admin, basically all these changes that I'm making to the environment will get done on the administration workspace. Only Ops Manager admins have access to that administration workspace. So basically, that user role cannot be scoped by default. It has access to everything. But what you can do is you can define who has access to that user role. So you can actually create AD groups for SCOM admins and just add it like that. So you do handle your administration in the same way as the other stuff. Okay, so for notifications, we have a couple of things. This section over here is where that's configured. You've got your channels, you've got your subscribers, and you've got your subscriptions. Where most of the work is done is around your subscriptions, unless you're getting into things like message formatting. If you're getting into message formatting, which can be different based on notifications, that gets done at the channel level. But what I'm going to demonstrate right now is the subscriptions, and I'll just show you how that can get changed. Okay, so we have a lovely disconnection there. All right, excuse the delay there. All right, so we were talking about notification subscriptions. So over here, I've defined a few notification subscriptions. So I've kind of followed the approaches that I've given, right? I've defined a few right here. I've defined critical alert email subscriptions, and I've defined high priority alert subscriptions. And I've also defined a notification subscription based on information that comes in as related to SQL. So if my SQL admins wanted specific notification information. So I've got three strategies going on here. Let me just show you quickly how I've defined that. So it's the criteria area here, which is where the work gets done, right? So I've got several different things that I can pick, and then it's all in this section here for conditions. I can have alerts come in that are raised by any instance of a group or a class, and the class is what I used for defining my SQL notifications. But I can also define an instance with a specific name or of a specific severity and priority. So those two sections here map to the alert fields which I showed you earlier, right? So in the case here, what I've actually done is I've designed it such that notifications come in with all alerts of a critical severity. Now, what I could have, so in the second notification subscription, the only thing that I made that was different was that instead I said of a specific priority, and I set it to high priority. Okay? So I can define my subscriptions accordingly. Now, that's easy enough. You can make these as complex as you need them to be, or you can combine criteria as needed. You can also get to the point where you set up who gets these notifications. So that's where you define your subscribers using your leverage your AD groups as much as possible here, please. And you can configure things such as schedules for when they get emailed and so forth. The schedules get handled at the subscribers level. It's not too much rocket science there. And in this channels area, that's where you actually leverage the channels that you've configured. By default, for the most part, we're going to use email as the notification channel. But this is where you can handle your messaging formatting change, and I'll show you that in just a second. So this section just down here is the alert aging. So remember that I said you can handle notifications not just as a strategy to extend your monitoring, but some people may want to leverage notifications as an escalation process when they define their business policy. So, you know, my Exchange server's been down. I've got admins who are working on that. Help desk is handling the ticketing and so forth. My admins have been working on it, but I care that if the system has been down for 10 to 15 minutes or more, I might have SLAs that are getting impacted at this point, so I want additional help going on, or I want additional activities happening in my business to help resolve that more quickly. I can introduce this as a policy to help manage how monitoring happens in the environment, just leveraging that alert aging, right? So say after 15 minutes, if nothing's changed with regards to the issue, in addition to the alert information that you've sent out, now I want you also to send out an email so that these activities can happen in my environment. Okay. So I also mentioned that you can change the message formatting that comes in. So by default, if alerts come in, that stuff gets handled here under the general settings, right? If you look in the alerts information right here, that gets configured, and you have some sort of a general message format that happens. Looks like we might have a disconnection here. Well, the joys of technology, eh? So while that's trying to reconnect, just quickly, what I wanted to demonstrate for you were two things. One, I actually wanted to show you that the notification message format can be changed at the channel level. By default, the alert format gets defined, and for the most part, that can be changed if you need to, but is defined in general basically in the console for alerts. And aside from that, if you want to, you have the opportunity to change that again for notifications. Here, let me just see if I can reestablish a Please excuse the delay. All right, so we're back. Okay, so in the alerts, you can basically configure that information as you need to. Now, with regards to the notification subscriptions, you can change how the messaging formatting occurs based on the channel, right? So here, if I go to my email notification channel, I can go to this format section here, and I can configure the information that's come in. So if the alerting information comes into the console, I can view it one way. And then if I send an email, I can view it another way. Now, there's actually a testing aspect to this. So the way I'm going to view information in Outlook is that's one thing, because I've got an email client, and that can work up to characters in my screen, and I can see as much as I can see in there. But if I'm getting alerts to a BlackBerry, so if I have, say an admin who's traveling home using public transit, I may want to get specific information that he can react to very quickly in the email header, such as, streamline the subject to say what type of system is down, criticality, and say have a message there that says system down based on information that I've discovered about my process and so forth. So the last thing that I want to show you with regards to notifications is that temporary scenario that I mentioned that we should only reserve as one-offs. So I also suggested that in some cases you may have situations which occur in the environment that we haven't necessarily planned for. So we've defined our business process, we've got our management pack inventory, we know how to handle our alerts, we've got a notification strategy defined around that for escalation or some other strategy, but something happens in the environment that we weren't expecting. Okay, how do we address that? So until we can get process defined around that, we still care about that gets addressed in the environment. So what I can do is, say, for example, I care about this fact that there's an issue with this switch. What I can do is, just based on the alert, I can go through and define a notification subscription based on the rule or the monitor that created that alert, right? So here in this case, I'm going through and I'm creating a brand new notification subscription based on that rule. So it's got a name which matches the name of the alert. And if you look in criteria, you can see right here that the criteria for this particular subscription is created by a specific rule or monitor, and you can actually see which rule or monitor is creating that subscription. So once again, I consider these one-offs or temporary scenarios because they don't specifically fit as part of an overall plan, which is how you should approach monitoring in general. I think you'll have a much better experience if you approach monitoring in a structured fashion. Okay, so that's it for the demo on notifications. Again, please excuse the slight delay. Yeah, we have a question about notifications. Sure. So the question was, is it possible to create criteria groups and join these by, I'm sorry, can you? Okay, so I believe I understand. I'm going to repeat it. You tell me if I've got it. So the question coming from the gentleman in the front here is, can I actually create subscription groups based on complex criteria which I define by using regular expressions, say for example, or, if, else, other than, which I define? So the answer to that is yes, you can do that. It's not, you're not going to be able to do that from the console. Okay? It's actually something that which you're going to define within the management pack itself. There's, the thing with Operations Manager is management packs and so forth. They're very customizable, right? You can do that programmatically or via scripts or whatever. That's not specifically in scope for this presentation because I've defined this presentation around using what's for the most part, as repeatable as possible. So any SCOM admin should be able to accomplish these using simple tools. Now that said, it's going to need the skill set to be able to define that script, right? And create those groups. But the answer is absolutely, you can define those. Pardon me? Right, not via like just the simple console. Like you have to, you're going to have to crack a scripting tool or something to get that defined and then poke it into the XML. Okay. All right. So, okay, we spoke about inventory management packs, the alerts. We spoke about notifications. Let's talk about the reports a little bit. Yes, OpsMan can report, and actually many management packs do come with reports out of the box. It leverages SQL Server reporting services. Okay, so if you can get the reports into SQL Server reporting services, you can get them into Ops Manager. The security model is not specifically administered within OpsMan itself, so it's still a little bit disconnected from that regard. All I can do is I can actually define who has access to see reports. So I showed you that if I scope user roles, say an operator, right, he can only see monitoring and he can see my favorites, right? If I add the user role also to report operators, which is a user role in SCOM, he'll also be able to view reports. And I can define which reports he sees, but I don't do that within the console. I do that within SQL Server reporting services, so I haven't got a demo around security. But reporting is a pretty specialized skill. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to show you how to get some value out of what's in the box. Okay? All long-term data in Operations Manager is stored in something called the data warehouse. So in Operations Manager, every time information comes in, what happens is that there's a dual write. The information goes into the OpsDB, and the information also goes into the data warehouse. Now, by default, for 7 days, you can retrieve that information from the console using a view, using a performance view, or getting a task, or some. If you want to pull it out of the OpsDB, you can do that. Beyond the 7 days, by default, which that value is customizable, you have to get the information out of the data warehouse, and you do so by using reports. Okay? There's a number of reports which are predefined, and I'm going to show you how to use those. By default, information is stored in the data warehouse for a period of 400 days, so that's more or less a year and a quarter. Okay? That can also be changed. The reporting workspace is not terribly intuitive. The reason for that is that you have to understand this thing called targeting, which is a fairly complex thing to understand in Operations Manager in and of itself. You have to understand classes, groups, so on and so forth, and it's not necessarily easy to figure that stuff out. So the reporting workspace in and of itself, although you can view which reports are there, and I'll demonstrate that, you can do things like schedule reports, you can save the reports and share them out. You can also publish them for future use by other things like SharePoint and stuff like that as well. But what I like to do when I'm defining reports is I like to do it a little more intuitively. So, for example, if I'm showing management how to do that, they're going to think, okay, if I want to get a report, I want to get it based on this computer. That's just how people think, right? They say, I want to get reports on these systems or these applications. So this is where I can see these systems or these applications in Ops Manager. So I refer to this as using a starter object. Now, the management packs, for the most part, are structured such that because they're already pre-targeted to the classes which they handle, you're going to see report tasks which are available. And I like to show people how to run the reports from there. In fact, I'm going to illustrate the F5 management pack in particular in this case. Some management packs, although the reports are listed in the reporting workspace, because of the way that the targeting works, don't always work correctly from the reporting workspace specifically. You actually have to, in some specific cases, launch these reports using the monitoring view and have that starter object, which is already pre-targeted to specific classes. But the nice thing about using a starter object is that you don't always have to understand targeting. And the job's already done for us. And I'll show you a little bit of a difference in there for how that works. Now that said, if I want to run ad hoc reports, that's fine. I can go through the console and I can actually select what I want, run the report, pick the criteria, go, and then I can have a variety of export formats and so on and so forth. What's nice about Ops Manager is that I can actually do that work once, and then I can create a schedule which handles that automatically for me on some frequency. And I've got a variety of delivery formats where I can schedule reports. I can send them out to a file share somewhere for consumption. I can send them out to a file share which at the other end translates to a SharePoint site. I can send them out via email. I can send them out via pretty much any vehicle imaginable. The easy way to do that is file share, which is there by default, and email. I just configure that when I'm setting up my SSRS as an option, that it can go out via email, and then that will translate as a delivery method in OpsMan as well. Let me give you a quick demo on using canned reports. Okay, so I did mention that using the reporting workspace is not terribly intuitive, and I'll show you an example here. So if I go to the Server 2008 operating system monitoring management pack, let's say I've got a report here that I'm interested in getting performance history available megabytes. Pardon me, folks, we have a slight disconnection issue again. Let me just attempt to reconnect that. Okay, well, I'm going to talk while that's attempting to reconnect just so that I can get my ideas out here. All right, so if I wanted to get the available megabytes just quickly here, I would go into the report. And, okay, so the criteria here is pretty, it's pretty simple. I can get that hourly aggregation, and I could go as far back as I want. So in this case, what I'll do is I'll pick this month, first day, up to today. I've got my data aggregated hourly. I can choose to use business hours if I like. What I'll do is I'll add an object, and in this case, I actually get a bunch of classes which make sense. Many reports are badly designed so that you get the entire list of OpsMan classes, and it's tough to know which class to pick from this workspace, right? You actually have to go through the instructions, then hope the instructions are right to begin with, and then you have to pick your class. But the idea here is you have to understand targeting in order to make that work, right? So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to pick a server, which you can tell that the class that it's defining here is Windows operating system. And then what that'll do is that'll give me my object that I can report on. Now, that's great. If I care enough to understand that I need to pick Windows operating system as the class and then run my report, that's fine. Do managers always understand that if they want to have access to reporting? Not so much, right? So here, if I want to get information, I can go into my report. Now, for the most part, my customers don't really like this default view up here, which is some sort of aggregate total. They like to go into the link over here and get the detailed information. And this is where you get your data for the report. Now, I don't really like to show people to do reporting from here. What I like to do is I like to show them from the monitoring workspace. I find it a lot more intuitive. So what I'll do is I'll pick a Windows computer, and then I'll go. It'll display in the console tasks associated to that. So here, if I pick Windows computer, in this case, I'll see a bunch of servers that are defined. So what I'll do is, just to show you the same test, I'll pick the same server. And notice here on the right, I've actually got some report tasks. So remember, the report I was running was memory availability, available memory. I'm going to run that as well, but from this space. Now, notice the difference over here in what I'm targeting, right? Remember, the object class from the reporting workspace was going to be operating system. Here, the object class is Windows computers. You know what? The management pack did the work for me and targeted the report so that it's going to work anyways, even though the class that's being targeted is different. So if I run the report in the same way, so if I pick this month, first day, and I run this report, I'll get my data anyways. I'll go into the detail over here, and I can get my detail. Now, what I like to do from here is I like to actually show people that they can do what I call as a bait and switch. So if I care about running reports from a single object, that's great. If I want to get reports from more than a single object, I can leverage groups. Now, if I like the report, I've gone through the work and figured out how it is that I want to run the report. That's perfect. I can do it from here. But I can bait and switch using the screen right here. So I've got my parameter area back. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click Change. And instead of using just the object, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a group. And then I'm going to type Server 2008 for my search. And I get here my Windows 2008 computer group, right? So I'll add that. Click OK. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to remove the object that I had previously selected, so I just get the group now. So now it's going to give me all of the objects that are contained in the Windows 2008 computer group. And if you remember, those are going to translate into Windows computers, right? In some way, shape, or form. They're going to translate into servers first, but they will go up to Windows computers. So now if I run this report from the group, here, I've got 4 objects instead of 1. And if I go to into the Actions pane, right, I get my aggregate total. I can actually get performance details for every object, and it'll list them out individually. So that's actually a pretty great way to get your reporting process in place, right? What's nice about using the dynamic group is as servers get added, they're going to contribute to the report and so on and so forth. So that's a great way to set up reporting. You can schedule those, have them distributed via email or posted to a SharePoint site, however the case may be. But that's a great way to leverage some basic use of the console to get some real value from the product. Okay, so that is what I want to talk to you about with regards to reporting. So the last section I'll cover is going to be on dashboards and views. So by default, you get information in the Ops Manager console from views. That alert view at the top, the active alerts view, is an alert view. The Windows Computers view I showed you is a state view, which shows object health state. For the most part, we get information from OpsMan from alert views first, state views second. After that, the popular views that I see are performance and diagram. A lot of people like those diagram views, especially when you're using distributed applications, right? And I can show you a little bit about how you can leverage those to enhance your process. So they're critical because that's your first source of information when you're looking into the Ops Manager console. When you scope your user roles, that is really the information that you want to restrict so that people get useful information that they can react on very quickly and not become overloaded with information that comes through the console and then not know what to do with it, or you don't have a process defined around that, right? So what a dashboard is, all right, so a dashboard is a type of view. You have your alert view, you have your state view, you have your performance view, you have your diagram view, you have your web console view, and you've also got an event view and a dashboard. A dashboard is basically a shortcut holder for other types of views. So what you do is you decide on the format of your dashboard, however many panes you would like to put in there. Typically, I find 4 is okay, but a little bit less than that is better because of the size. But what I see people do with views, especially when they're defining dashboards, is what they'll do is they'll right-click on the view and they'll choose Open in a new window, and then that's where you'll use your extended displays, right? So if you have, say, for example, a help desk department, what I see done a lot of time is people have a large screen affixed at the front of the room, and what they'll do is they'll very simply create a dashboard and they'll drag that view and have it there as their kind of window into what's going on in the system at all times. And that's a great way to get summary information which is specific to what you care about in the environment. Different dashboards can be relevant to different people. Just in the same way that you scope your alerts or you scope your notifications, that you may want to have your dashboards working in different ways. Let me just quickly show you a couple of examples about how those are working as well. Excuse me. Okay. Telling me the internet is not loving me today. All right. So what I like, the particular dashboard view that I like to show people, which gets a lot of attention, is under the network monitoring. Because by default, what you get is when you actually discover network devices, you get some sort of a proximity view, which shows most of your information. Okay, at least we're not down. All right, so what I'll do is I'll actually show you the network summary dashboard here, which should pop up. So here you have an example of a couple of network devices. Here we have the ASA device and a switch, and you get interface monitoring all in the same view. If I were to go and create a dashboard, right, that's just as simple as creating a view. What I need to do is I need to target an unsealed management pack, which I'll create, which will allow me to customize that. So I'll go down here to my test management pack. And I'll just create a new dashboard view. The experience is a little bit different in OpsMan 2012. Just give it a name, and then I basically pick the layout that I want. And then I fix whichever views that I want. Now that's actually going to take a little bit of time to list through because it's the same thing as targeting, right? What happens is that basically it'll go through which views are available to you, and you'll be able to affix them in the appropriate areas of the dashboard, just like my summary dashboard. I don't have a lot more time to demo this particular section, so what I'll do is I'll finish through the slides. So things we've discussed in here are inventorying the management pack, working with alerts, using notifications, pre-canned reports, and dashboards and views. And by leveraging these particular topics within Operations Manager and getting to know them well, you can really maximize your capability in OpsMan and create some repeatable processes which are easy to manage for most SCOM admins. Now, I'm going to be around for a little bit. I'm going to go to the Ask the Expert booth for a while, so if you want to come see me for questions, I need to leave the stage for the next presenter. I hope you've enjoyed the session. I know this topic is pretty dear to my heart. I work a lot with SCOM, and I put this session together for you folks. So please do fill out your evals. I do look at all of them. I hope you enjoyed the session. Thank you very much.